decide which stories I wanted to read to you. There were so many good ones. So I did choose 4, and I have a few others that are on the back burner for maybe a future creepy stories video. Would you like me to jump in? Okay, here we go. This first story is called Filch at the Lake. When I was 12, I had a creepy encounter at the lake with a man who looked exactly like Filch from Harry Potter. Same scraggly hair and everything. I was spending the weekend with my cousins, and my aunt took us out to the lake one day. Oddly, it appeared that we were the only people there that day. Absolutely no one else was there, so we had the lake to ourselves to be as rowdy as we wanted. Me and my cousins were having a blast. After a little while, this man showed up alone. Picture Filch in a pair of swimming trunks. He got in the water and swam around by himself. Us kids paid no attention to him at first and just kept playing. But he kept edging closer and closer to us. We would move away from him, and he would just slowly move toward us again, all while staring at us with a creepy smile on his face. He never said anything, but he did almost get close enough to touch us. Finally, my aunt yelled at us to all get out of the water immediately and rushed us into the truck to leave. Dude was super creepy. I still remember that weird grin on his face. If we looked at him, he would just nod his head approvingly as he moved closer and closer. I think about that dude every time I see Filch in a Harry Potter movie. That is the end of that first short story. That story cracked me up the first time I read it because I really did picture Filch just bobbing around in the lake. No shade to the actor, but he plays an amazing, greasy, creepy, decrepit old man, and imagining having him swimming towards you in a lake is pretty terrifying. For this next story, it is a paranormal one. This one is called Opinions on the Crying Lady That I Tried to Hug as a Child. Getting straight to the point, when I first moved into my new house, I was around 5. I don't live there anymore, and I am 19 now. I still remember this experience vividly. It makes me tear up every time I talk about it. One night, in the middle of the night, I woke up. My mom normally slept with me at the time, but she wasn't there. I figured that she went to my dad's room because she would sometimes do that after I fell asleep. Then I realized that there was a woman sitting on the ground with her back against my bed. She had her knees up and she was holding her legs and crying into her arms. For some reason, I thought she was my mom, almost like she was somehow making me believe she was my mom, since she didn't look like my mom. She had long black hair that was very messy and tangled. She was wearing a long white dress, which was also dirty and had holes and rips and things. She also had pale skin. Since I thought she was my mom, I sat down next to her and tried to comfort her. I kept talking to her and asking her what was wrong, but she wouldn't reply to me. I sat in silence for a while, and then I decided to hug her. Once I put my arms around her, she disappeared. No noises or anything, just gone. I was scared shitless. It took me years to convince my mom that this actually happened, and this is the closest I've got to any kind of otherworldly or paranormal entity. Does anyone know what this could have been? I never saw her face since she buried her head in her arms. Never saw her again in person after that, but I did have reoccurring fever dreams with a certain ghost a few times. Not sure if it was her though. And that's the end of that story. Somebody left a comment. Acting that way towards her, she probably didn't even remember to be scary towards you. Everyone appreciates a hug and a nice talk. I don't know. Imagine it. A ghost with long tangled black hair and a white, torn, dirty dress crying by your bedside. Would you give her a hug? Okay, so this third story, for some reason, cracked me up, even though it is definitely terrifying. This story is called The Chic Visitor. While I was in college, I worked at Magnolia Bakery on the Upper West Side and usually worked the closing shift. Almost every night, about an hour before closing, this tall and lanky woman who looked Eastern European would come in, and she always wore the most unique and stunning ensembles. She was always smiling and never talked above a whisper. Loki was me. But there was something about her presence that unsettled me. I felt like I couldn't look her in the eyes for too long, and I felt rude and silly for being a little aloof with a regular customer for no particular reason. One day, when I started to get more comfortable with my colleagues, I made a comment to one of them that the lady's outfit was particularly stunning that night. With no other context or lead-in, my colleague looked at me with a wide-eyed, fearful expression and said, "She scares me. I don't know why." And it sent a chill up my spine that someone else felt the same way as me. One night, she sat at a corner table well past closing, which we didn't typically mind while we were doing closing side work, and I heard a low whimper. I looked over at her, and she looked right back at me with the most devastated and desperate look. She was crying, and dark black mascara was streaked down her cheeks. My colleague, who was sweeping by her table, stopped and asked her if she was okay, and she let out an ear-splitting shriek before running out of the bakery. We were all in stunned silence for a good 15 to 20 seconds. That night, I decided for no particular reason to turn down a different street on my walk home. I have no idea why, because it was a totally unnecessary detour. I was passing a townhouse with a very grand entrance staircase and heard a voice from beside the staircase say, "You." I turned around and she was there looking at me with the mascara now dried on her face. But instead of crying, she instead had a maniacal look on her face that scared the hell out of me. Before I even had a chance to say anything, she said, "Come inside." I said, "No thanks," and started walking very quickly away. From the end of the block, I heard an ear-splitting shriek that was undoubtedly hers, and I started running home looking over my shoulder the whole time. I never saw her again after that night. As much as she scared me, I still hope she got the help she so clearly needed. That is the end of that third story. I love how they paint a very detailed picture. I can imagine it so vividly. Honestly, I don't know what that woman's intentions were by telling them to come inside, but I'm glad this person didn't stick around to find out. Hopefully she did get that help that she needed. Okay, this last story is a good one. And I actually didn't think this one was funny. This one was just creepy. This one is called Disgruntled Hospital Worker Tries to Euthanize My Grandfather. My grandfather died when I was 17, around 5 years ago, and his last months were rough on the whole family. He had advanced brain cancer, but he spent most of his time at home under hospice care. One afternoon, it was about 2 weeks before he died, I was alone with my grandpa waiting for the hospice nurse to come check on him. A man who I'd never seen before knocked on the door. He was wearing hospital scrubs, but he hadn't brought any equipment with him, which was odd. I asked him if he worked for the hospital, and he nodded. He said this was his first shift with my grandpa, but that he'd reviewed my grandfather's file and that he wanted to speak to whichever family member had the legal authority to pull the plug. My grandpa wasn't even on life support, so I guess this guy was using plug as an expression. I should say that I live in a right-to-die state where euthanasia is legal, so it's not like that option had never occurred to us, but as far as I know, no member of my family had ever expressed an openness to euthanize him. I told him that I had no authority to make that decision, and that my grandfather, who was now delirious and unable to consent to much of anything, had specifically said to prolong his life indefinitely unless he was crying out in extreme pain, which he wasn't. The man put his hand on my shoulder as though he were consoling me, and he talked about how old people become burdens that their families need to let go. The man pulled a bottle of pills out of his pocket and said they were barbiturates that would trigger a peaceful death. He said the coroner would determine that he died naturally from his cancer. I started to panic, and I firmly told him that under no circumstances would he be euthanizing my grandpa at this time, but he started to untwist the bottle as he walked towards my grandpa's bed. I tried to wrestle the pills from his hand, and he seemed startled. He played innocent and said he just wanted to show the pills to my grandpa. He knew perfectly well that my grandfather had almost no idea what was going on. I called 911 and rapidly explained the situation to the dispatcher. The man suddenly became very scared and bolted out of the house. The cops arrived within 5 minutes, and my grandpa's actual hospice nurse arrived a few minutes after that. Based on my physical description, the police and hospital staff were able to identify the man as a recently fired hospital orderly. He was charged with making a criminal threat based on my testimony, but unfortunately he was acquitted. So, wherever you are, let's not meet. That is a very strange story to me. Why would somebody be so intent on killing someone? I just don't get it. Fuck that dude, whoever that dude is, and I hope that he doesn't trick anybody or end up killing anybody. Okay, that is the end of that 4th story. I hope you enjoyed these stories that I chose. Definitely come back if you want to listen to the other ones that I thought were good as well. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, please leave a like, and down below, please leave a comment of which story was your favorite. Thank you so much for coming to hang with me today. I will see you in the next one.